Hi, my name is Annie, and today I will be talking about breaking boundaries towards the great unknown. My talk would start with a little story with my best friend. My best friend always talks so little, yet I have never met anyone who actually understands me better. One time, sophomore year, out of curiosity, I asked her the following question: "Why don't you enjoy discussion?" She hesitated for a moment as I saw the little Facebook bubble flickered. "I don't want to sound stupid like I don't know stuff," she said. But she knows a lot of things, from playing the guitar to cooking wild rice, from Japanese literature to French cinema, from sensing my sadness to pointing out my contradiction. Not knowing what to respond at the time, I ironically thought, thinking out loud, I'm not the expert of her situation. So I sent back a sad face, saddened by the fact that I couldn't rid her fear of uncertainty with my own uncertainty. Fast forward 1 year, I was walking around campus taking pictures of people's graffiti statement for a class. I walked into the second floor bathroom. Yes, the one labeled by someone as the entrance to the Ministry of Magic. I looked ahead of me. On the wall, there were a few scribbly lines, and it goes something like this. Somebody wrote, "Do you feel lonely?" Another person responded, "Sometimes. But then I remember there are so many people who love me. You're your own worst critic." And then the next person, or maybe the same person, said, "Thank you for this." I stood in the tiny bathroom for a bit, having an aha moment. This is the response I have been looking for. So I quickly snapped a photo and sent it to my friend. She said, "Haha, that's cute." And this time, I finally got the chance to send back a smiley face. In my happiness lies my overdue realization that this is a moment of kindness, a small action elicited by the least amount of knowledge about another person possible, yet it made a huge difference for somebody somewhere. The unknown doesn't have to be scary, embarrassing, or dangerous. It can be filled with infinite potential like a half-written story. However, my realization didn't come easy. Growing up, I've always been taught that knowledge is power. Not just any power, but power with capital P that allows you to act and to be heard. I remember in a middle school classroom raising my hand volunteering for a fundraiser. My teacher asked me, "What do you know about fundraising?" I said, "Not much." She squinted her eyes and said, "Then why don't you raise your hand if you don't know what you're talking about?" I remember my dad, who always told me to never say anything when he is talking business with my mother, because don't comment on what you don't know. I was a fast learner, so over the years I've remembered to always put my hands down, my mouth shut if I don't know stuff, or to just quit engaging to start with. If this sounds familiar to you, or if this is actually appalling to you, I invite you to rethink the quote, "Knowledge is power," together with me, and ask yourself the following question. What kind of knowledge are we talking about when we say knowledge is power? And is everything really knowable? And most importantly, how can we rethink boundaries between known and unknown? The knowledge that I learned to prioritize has always been that of logic and rationality. From elementary school logic problems to moral dilemmas, I was primed to think about rationality as both the means and ends of learning. To be logical means to ask questions like, who is involved? What is happening? What is going on? And to be rational means to ask questions like, what does it cost to do it? How can we do it faster? And do I have to do it? My extensive training leads me to always very eagerly identify the plot, character, and development of each narrative, so that I can not only know something, but know something really well. However, not every story has a linear structure. That is just the nature of humankind. And to interact with those whose story is unique and doesn't fit into the efficient knowledge production system, it takes more than rational thinking. When I first started working as a volunteer teacher for children of migrant workers in Shanghai, most of my questions were answered with, "I don't know." "Where are your parents?" "I don't know." "How old are you?" "I don't know." "What do you want to learn?" "I don't know." In hindsight, I always regret asking those questions on the guideline, because for every children of migrant worker, there might be a story of trauma and pain that is beyond their own knowledge. After the first teammate approached me and he said, "This is such an impossible job. How can you teach someone when you know nothing about them?" But actually, we do know something about them. These children who sit quietly in the corner will respond to conversation in their regional dialect and to games that I come up with on the spot just to ease the tension. Most of these things are considered rather irrelevant to English learning, because after all, they're not in English. In fact, I was approached by my supervisor and saying that I was wasting class time, The children's time, she clenched her fist like this and say, they're here to learn English. However, it is during those moments that I truly feel connected with those children. They would gently laugh at me when I actually mispronounce some of the words in their dialect. And then their eyes would light up when we play Simon Says in half English, but mostly gestures. Only when they're no longer the subject of my personal knowledge and probing questions, and they open up to me when they realize that their needs and demands are empathized rather than analyzed. Max Weber said that the fate of our times is characterized by rationalization and intellectualization, and above all, the disenchantment of the world. Disenchantment indeed, when the only way to interact with a fellow human being is through facts and numbers. The world loses its magic. Fortunately, I started to realize when I was 15, being a volunteer tutor, that not every aspect of one person is truly knowable, nor should they be the subject of my scrutiny. Things that are unknown can sometimes be felt, and the key is compassion. Let's return to the little bathroom for a moment and think about all of the logics that goes against the effectiveness of this small act. The anonymity, the physical distance, and the temporal gap all said that it's not necessary, nor is it effective to return to someone's random statement on a bathroom wall. However, one stranger's compassion towards another stranger's sadness drove this act. Sometimes in the absence of a structure of knowledge, you're motivated by a feeling. You feel like you want to help children who struggles in mainstream classroom, so you decided to sign up for community engagement learning. You feel like you want to better the mental health situation on campus, so you decided to join a student organization. You don't know how yet, but you still really want to. How is that possible? What about the embarrassment? What about the danger? Carol Gilligan's Psychology and Family very beautifully phrases phenomena as the ethics of care. In a moment of need, when you allow others to feel the attention, the entirety of your attention, you are practicing the ethics of care. In a moment of need, when you say, there must be a way, instead of rushing to conclusion and apply all of the rationality and say there is no way, you're entertaining the ethics of care. When you try to engage with a problem just through numbers and fact, but also narrative and relationships, you are practicing the ethics of care. Because caring is not a battle of knowledge in which you have to use all you know and to become the expert of the situation so as to rescue them who are lacking knowledge. We're all working and learning with those who have a story to tell and a story to continue. I acknowledge that it's not always easy to trust your gut or to follow a sense of feeling, because haven't we all been taught at some point that we have to base our decision, especially important ones that affect others, on thoughts? Hence the banner phrase, think twice before you lead. In fact, if possible, think 3 times, 4 times, maybe more times. Thought in its past tense, the reason why I still sometimes shut my mouth for the fear of embarrassing myself, and why I still only raise my hand when I'm sure of my competence. However, isn't it true that the possession of knowledge is relative while the lack of it is absolute? Nobody in this world has ever heard a full story. For everything that's being told, something is left unsaid. For everything one sets eyes on, blind spots follow. I by no means said it's not important to be rational or efficient. I simply said that it's time for us to reject expertise knowledge as the only way through which action can be elicited, and together leap into the great unknown, guided by the feeling of compassion and a sense of eagerness to learn with instead of for someone. There are an infinite number of stories in this world, known and unknown. Don't let some of them fade unheard just because you dare not write a chapter of yours in it. Thank you for listening.